The transition to more sustainable food systems is accelerating, but real impact depends on how we use our resources more intelligently, reducing waste while creating new value. Welcome to the Impress podcast series, where we explore how research, technology and innovation come together to transform underutilized resources into sustainable food solutions. I am Dimitra Fourkalidou from Reframe Food, and today with me is Iván Loaiza Alamo, who comes from University College Cork in Ireland. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. And to start, could you briefly introduce yourself and let us know about your role at University College Cork and what your connection to the Impress project is?
Yeah. So I am a postdoctoral researcher. I am working with Professor Marcel Jansen. We are working with Duckweed, which is a small plant, aquatic plant that we are trying to use to reduce the weight, to remediate waste from different industries. So we are doing cultivation of this plant to remove nutrients and contaminants from effluents. And that's part of the Impress project, one of the work package. And we are currently doing many experiments to try to achieve this goal.
Great. You mentioned duckweed. And when somebody thinks about duckweed, they can picture something like a green carpet floating on a still pond. But your Impress project research is literally taking the water out of the equation, from what I know. Can you explain the concept of Fogoponics and why shifting to it is such a breakthrough?
Yes, that came to the project, to our work, because we have seen that duckweed can grow with a very little water. It can just grow with high humidity environments. There were some reports about that. So we say, why not to just provide fog with nutrients to this plant and make it grow? This fog can also be made by the wastewater from different industries. We are working with the fish. And we have seen that the duckweed is growing very well, and at the same time you remove this column of water, so you can have more layer of these plants to grow biomass and also remediate the waste.
Okay, that's very interesting. We have seen vertical farming take off for leafy greens, but duckweed usually requires heavy standing columns of water. Can you explain the so-called weight bottleneck and how removing the water column entirely changes the game for indoor phytoremediation?
Yes, that's more or less what I was saying before. So when you have this system, because we have like a chamber, which is a small box that we put layers of fabric, and in this fabric we put the duckweed, and we have an inlet that the fog with the nutrients come to the fabrics and makes the duckweed to grow, and at the same time to remove the nutrients and also possible to contaminants. You can have many layers of fabric, one on top to each other, and you can have a separation of 2 centimeters probably, because you have just one textile, another textile, and you put the plants there on top. They are very small plants. You have the carpet of the plants, but actually just in one thin layer. So then you can have up to 10 or 20 layers. If you use the column of water in the stack systems, like there are trays, you can see like a trays like that, and then you have 50 centimeters of water depth. So it means that you cannot have too many on top to each other. So with this Fogoponics system, actually you can multiply the trays that you have, and you can have more production of plants, and you can remediate the wastewater more efficiently.
Okay, now it's clear. Thank you for clarifying. The picture that you gave about this made it understandable. Thank you. So most people associate duckweed with ponds and stagnant water. How do you convince a plant, let's say, that naturally floats, to grow on a vertical fabric support?
Yes, so that was a difficult. Now, first you have to always test and do a small experiment to see if the plants can grow very well just by providing moist fog. So you provide these particles, microparticles, with nutrients. So you have to put nutrients in this. It's a mister. So this fog goes to the chamber, as I explained, and it provides the nutrients to all the plants. So the plants, they will be uptaking or taking the nutrients from the fronds, from the roots, and they will be, depending on how much nutrient you give and how humid is the environment when it's growing, they will be happy. If you don't provide too much nutrients or too much humidity to the system, they will not grow very well. So the first experiments that we did, we provide different amount of nutrients, and we provide different amount of, we can say like a more fog, just more fog. More fog give more humidity. So then the plants were almost as happy, the same conditions than they can be in the water. So then you grow is very similar on what is in the water, but they are in the fog. They are not in water.
Okay. And are there any other potential areas where Fogoponics can be applied?
Yes, since we are talking about this thin layer fabric, and the system is just the system that we have in the school is like 50 centimeters, 30 centimeters. In this system, you can grow half kilo of duckweed in just 1 week, because you have 10 layers, and every layer you will have like around 50 grams. So then you have half kilo that you can grow in just one box like this. So it means that this box, you can put it in a very small spaces, no? And some of our ideas is like for researchers like us, when we have to do excursions, sometimes some researchers have to go to the Antarctica, to the Arctic, to the polar, where they bring their food and things, but they don't have fresh food for that. So this system, for example, you can maintain and you can keep it. You just put nutrients, you put your plants, the small plants, and then they start growing, and then you can have actually fresh plants for consumption. And also, we were thinking that in space missions, you know, astronauts, they go to space. In some of these missions, they have to stay for weeks, and they always have this dry food to have in the space. But why not to have a system that can provide you fresh plant? So we think that this Fogoponics can have many applications for very small, tight areas.
Yeah, it sounds like a very compact thought and a box that can go everywhere, and it can grow there. And now from an operational standpoint, how labor-intensive is the system compared to traditional wastewater treatment? And what does a typical maintenance day look like for a Fogoponic rack?
Yeah, so it's always a lot of work with the, of course, no? In the normal systems, you will have the ponds that you have to take the plants, you have to change the water, and then you have to probably give it some cleaning of the ponds and things to try to avoid contamination, cross-contamination, no? Of algae. In the Fogoponics, it's similar, it's a smaller scale, but now you are working with fabrics. So there is no more water. So at least you don't have to remove all the water to make the cleaning of the system. So you can take the fabrics, you can remove them, you can clean them and put them back to the system. Of course, in that process, you also harvest the plants that they are growing, you take them, and then you make the system clean again to use it for the next cycle. We have seen that in 7 days is good to already, because you are growing many plants, so it's good to harvest the plants, try to clean the system as much as you can, but we see that the best way is to try to work in a sterilized system, in a xenic system. So then the plants will be not contaminated with algae, and the work will be less difficult, less demanding.
While you were speaking, I was wondering what kind of fabrics are used?
So we use a normal textile. That we start experiment with a normal textile. It has to be very transparent, because the idea is when you have 10 layers of duckweed growing in each layer, the light will come and they have to provide light to the plants. So it's the best is to have like a very transparent layer, because they will penetrate and they will go all the way of the system. That's one of the things. The other thing is that we consider is that the fabric can be hydrophobic. So you have the fog coming, but because like clothes, the water will not go through, it will stay there. So it will provide a kind of nice substrate, wet for the duckweed to grow. So that's two conditions that we consider. But it's a very simple fabric. It's not a super expensive fabric.
Okay, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Great. If we look at a standard urban wastewater facility, how much more nutrient removal could we achieve by stacking these fogoponic layers versus a single level outdoor lagoon?
So when we talk about the normal, the outdoor lagoon for wastewater remediation, we are talking always about one layer. So that's one of the things, because you have the area and you have just one layer. In this case, in Fogoponics, you can have up to 10, even more layers, depending on how is your system, how you provide the lights and everything. So the removal of nutrients that they can take the plants are very similar. We have compared results from liquid to fog, and they are very similar. They can reduce the nutrients and the contaminants around half or 3 times less, depending on the conditions. But the goal, the new thing of this Fogoponics is that actually you are creating a system that can be like a natural filter. So you have 1 layer, 2 layers of plants, 3 layers of plants, 10 layers of plants. The medium will come through the layers they pass through. As soon as it's going through, it will clean the water more. So you don't have only 1 layer like the pond. You have 10 layers that the fog is going through, and after that, the reduction of the nutrients will be more than 2 or 3 times. They can be like around 10 times, depending on how is the condition. The conditions of the removal of contaminants or nutrients, it changes depending on the medium, depending on the amount of plants that you have.
Before I ask you my last question, I would like you to explain to our audience and me what Limna minor is.
Limna minor is a species of duckweed.
Okay.
It's a species of duckweed. This is the lentil, the lentil that you have, like a small green plant that you can have in the ponds, as you mentioned. This one we work with this one because it's the one that we have in stock, the one it's more like more standard. The plant that we are using, that we know how it grows, we know the light that it needs, the nutrients that it needs. So we already kind of are expert using this Lemna minor. At the same time, they are also trying to work with this plant for different purposes in different research groups. So we can also exchange ideas, share some ideas. So the Lemna minor it's our favorite duckweed that we are using for multiple purposes. We use it for factory remediation, but we are also trying to use it for plant biomass production. It still cannot be used for human consumption, but the goal probably in the future is that we can prove that it can be used for human consumption in Europe or around the world.
Okay, let's hope for that. So once Limna minor has done its job, we are left with a massive amount of biomass. And what is the vision for that harvested duckweed?
Yes, so I will always kind of divide my work in 2. So we were talking a lot about circular economy, how to reduce waste, how to recycle nutrients, and try to make the industries more sustainable. So this duckweed, it can be used to remediate wastewater. It takes the nutrients, it can take the contaminants, and it can be very useful, and it can grow by you doing this. So this duckweed for human consumption is forbidden because you are using wastewater, which has some bacteria, some pathogens that cannot be used for human consumption. But then you can also grow this duckweed for human consumption in the very, as I mentioned, arsenic. Everything has to be very clean, very clean. So then you have 2 different approach. One for cleaning waste, and the other one for human consumption. For when you clean the waste, you grow plants, so you have to use the plants too. So then we have partners in the project, in the Express project, that they are actually trying to take the protein, the fatty acids from this duckweed. So they isolate the chemicals. So you take all these nutrients or beneficial compounds for humans, and you just use them for different purposes. You can use it for livestock feed, aquaculture also to feed fish. You can use for fertilizers for plants, commercial plants you can grow. So that's kind of indirect human utilization, not directly, but it can be still useful. So it have different useful, applications, And the other one, it can go straight for human consumption if everything is also safe, like the wolfia. Wolfia is a duckweed that is already approved for human consumption. It's another duckweed, but it's very small, and they use it also for space missions. So yeah. I mean, duckweed has a lot of potential use. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ivan, thank you so much for explaining everything to us, and especially for this last picture that you gave about the two different types of duckweed. It was a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being part of this project.
Yeah, thank you to you for the interview.
For those watching or listening, this episode is part of the Impress podcast series. And if you want to learn more about the Impress project, you can follow us on social media or visit our website. Thank you for joining us today.